So, you want to be a dungeon master.
So you want to be a dungeon master.
So you want to be a dungeon.
So you want to be a dungeon master.
So, you want to be a dungeon master.
That's great. We're here to help. I'm Taylor.
And I'm Justin. This week, we're going to be taking on the backstory. The tips and tricks in this episode will help players and dungeon masters alike. We're going to go over all the ways that we can create, utilize, and even exploit the PC's backstories. From one-shots to campaigns, regardless of the game, backstories can be a huge tool. They can help us world build, prep our sessions, plan for encounters, and more. So let's jump right into it. But first...
Always
gonna be but first? This question comes from Reddit. It's something that I scrolled upon on accident one day, just like looking for stuff. And it was an interesting question that I felt like, let's talk about this. And the question from this OP is, what's something that's become commonly accepted in D&D that annoys you? So this is like a personal preference, opinionated kind of thing. Just something that has become common, but still sort of irks you a little bit. The example that this person gives is people asking if they can roll for things. They believe that you shouldn't be asking your DM to roll. You should be telling your DM what your character is attempting to do, and the DM will tell you if a roll is necessary and what stat to roll. And I sort of agree with it. I think there's a lot of leeway for newer players. Like, you're just getting into it, so it's fine. But at a certain point, it can get a little annoying when players are, instead of saying, hey, I want to see if this character has any body language or like something that's telling me he's withholding information based on, like, is he sweating? Is he twitching, like fidgeting his fingers? Like, what's going on? Okay, yeah, make an insight check. I would much prefer that than just the player being like, insight check. I insight him.
I'm so guilty of that. Yeah,
it comes up.
It's myself.
Well, Critical Role is to blame for a lot of that because they made it common in their games to just have the players shout insight, and it has become like almost like a home rule for them.
Right.
But
yeah,
that is something that I think can be annoying. Again, this is all personal preference kind of stuff, but yeah.
Something that I think is pretty commonly accepted is trying to like rob the store or rob somebody. Like, oh, I want to sneak up and steal his wallet or something like that. A lot of sleight of hand checks and a lot of things where it's like, I mean, it's just a dude on the street. What are you trying to steal off of him? Type of deal. Like, it's maybe not super common in every game, but I have had a table where I basically had to break them of trying to steal everything. It was just a table of kleptomaniacs.
Yeah.
And like that is kind of annoying to an extent, because it's like eventually they're going to get caught. And then what happens when they get caught? They're going to get into a big fight.
Yeah.
And, and a lot of times it's just like, you guys are like all on the good side of the alignment spectrum, not to put too much weight on the alignment thing, but like, we're not running a, cloak and dagger campaign here. This is, you guys are fighting for the king as his champions, going across the country and righting wrongs, but you're also going to go back in and try to sneak or steal from the shopkeep in every freaking town you go into. They're like, okay, well, we could buy this stuff, or we could just break in later and just steal everything. It's like, come on, guys.
Yeah, there does get to be a certain point sometimes where you're like, really? We're doing this?
Yeah.
You guys can't just afford the stuff? Like, why do I give you gold? Why do you have gold? Sometimes that is the case where you're like, that's why sometimes it depends on the table and stuff. Like, an offshoot of that example would be like people who have to haggle for every single price.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, we have Fellas in our home game where it's like she has expertise in some of these charisma skills, and she's a warlock, so she already has the +5. So it's like brutal. Like, we're getting 30s on deception or persuasion. So it was just like, it got to a point where it was like, if Fellas is with you guys shopping, the starting price is more than it should be because I know it's coming. I have to work it down to the reasonable price anyway, because if I start at market value, it's fucking not. So it's like, they're not going to make any money. Like, entire economies are going to crash and fail because of adventuring parties stealing or underselling items. It really is crazy. Yeah, that's a really good one. There's so many that come to mind, and it really is just play style preference. You know, like I personally, we all know this if you watched our actual plays. I feel very strongly about the shield spell in terms of letting players know, like, hey, he passes your AC. Do you want to cast shield? Yeah, I cast shield. All right, it goes past your shield. Like, versus, I do that. So
I got it. Yeah. But where the normal, a lot of times at a lot of tables is, oh, that's a 23 to hit. And then oh, okay, I guess I'll use shield. Oh, but if I rolled a 24, it would have beaten the shield anyway, and then they don't wind up using that spell.
As if their character
I think the
knows.
way that you do it is, very, I think the most fair way of doing it. It requires a tiny bit more prep as far as you need to know what all your players' ACs are beforehand.
Yeah. And know who has shield and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to. It's just like there are other parts of quote-unquote metagaming that I'm cool with, and for some reason the shield spell is one of those things I cannot give up. I'm just like, I can't do it. It's like I'm fine with players being like, oh, I only have 10 health left, I need help. That makes more sense to me because you would look like you had 10 health left. So like at least there's visual cues and this and that. But like, how are you as the player, the wizard, how do you know if it's one below or one above your shield AC? Like, how would you know that? I just, in the heat of battle, you're going to be sitting there and going, this sword strike that's coming in is going to be too much for my shield. I shall save the spell slot. What? So, yeah, it's just a tiny thing. There's a ton of like little tiny things I think can sometimes get frustrating, but also in the right hands can be amazing. Like there are times where people during combat start getting super outside the box and they're like, can I try and persuade him to attack his own party because I'm so beautiful, and also I just bought that new jacket and all this like crazy out of the box thinking where you're like, well, fuck. If I have to make the ranger roll dice to see if they hit with their fucking arrow that they've been training their entire life for, I have to make you roll something. And then
and also there's spells for that.
And also you're a spellcaster, you could cast a million spells, but you're choosing a mundane way to do this insane thing. I am going to have it be a roll. And then you get the person who's kind of like, well, it's such a fun idea. Can I do it with advantage? And you're like, it is a really fun idea. You're not getting advantage because what are we doing then? Then everybody gets advantage if they say something cool enough. Like, then it just, the DM unfortunately sometimes has to shut down fun. It's rare,
but
but sometimes it's necessary.
Not necessarily shutting down fun. It's preserving the fun for everybody.
That's a good way of looking at it, because that is true.
Yeah, because I mean, it really is like, if you do this, eventually it's going to get to a point where the game gets broken, and then everybody, rather than doing what's on their character sheets, they're going to start trying to come up with, oh, well, I didn't come up with a cool idea, so I guess I'll just attack or whatever. And then, because there are people who, characters that are made that don't have a bunch of crazy RP stuff that they can do, but they're wild in battle.
Yeah.
And it kind of takes away from those players and their creation of the story by kind of undercutting some of the rules as written.
Yeah.
I love the rule of cool, but eventually there are times when you just gotta be like, nah, it's too much.
Exactly. There are specific times where it really is just too much. It opens up Pandora's box of like, I'm going to give you advantage just because you asked nicely and because you failed. This is also like after you already told us your failed roll. So now I'm just like completely doing backflips to appease one player. Whereas when the fighter misses with their sword attack, they're not like, oh, can I get advantage because it was a cool sword attack? So it's like sometimes there's a ton of things. I'm cool with it when it's like funny. Like, obviously,
Right.
like, there are jokes, you know? We all play around. We all joke around. Our DM, are we level 30 yet? Hilarious. I love that shit. But then there are some
Great
questions
joke,
where
great
it's
joke.
like,
No, you're still
come
level
on,
8,
dude,
but
you
great
know.
joke.
You know I'm going to say no. Like, that's a crazy ask.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
you know, I'm all for shooting your shot. But let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Hey, gang. We wanted to talk to you about something pretty important real quick. See, we have some really cool ideas for the future, but we need your help. You can do that by supporting us through our Patreon. At the lowest tier, you get early access to podcast episodes, access to episodes of Action Surge, our post-session table talk show, and entry into a private channel on our Discord server. At the next tier, you can get access to Bonus Action, our bonus content podcast where we talk about a huge variety of D&D and TTRPG related things, like multi-class mystery mashup, where we get 2 random classes and have to build a character, or Monster Matchmaker, where we go over our favorite monsters at each CR level, or recaps of our home campaign, plus so much more. Joining the Patreon helps us continue to grow and put out content that gets better and better as we learn, improve, and try new things. So, check out the link in the description to join the gang today. Because today we're talking backstories.
Oh, yeah.
Let me ask you, Taylor, about some backstory ideas for yourself.
Sure.
In terms of
Sure.
creating characters and stuff like that. First, I want to talk to you as a player.
Okay. Let me put on my player hat real quick. Okay.
Where does the backstory come into the process of character creation for you?
A lot of times it comes in during my class selection, where I will be like, okay, I'm gonna go fighter. Okay, so how did I become a fighter? How did I learn these fighting styles? Was I somebody who, grew up on the front lines? Not grew up, but was a frontline soldier, and I just learned how to fight through extensive training through that. Did I train in a monastery for years or something like that? That's kind of more going monk route. But, depending on what class I'm going with, that already leads so much into how your character got to be where they're at in the story.
For sure. Yeah, there's so many building blocks of character creation that you can draw inspiration from and think about how they relate to this setting, assuming that you guys already have a setting planned out, and all those different ideas, not to mention how they relate to just the traditional tropes that we all think of, because that's sometimes fun to play with. The idea of the barbarian is the big, mean, stupid brute. That may not be true in your world setting, but that's true for the trope, the stereotype. Yeah. So playing against that could be really fun. Having your intelligence be slightly higher doesn't help you in combat for shit, but man, that's just a funny trope idea. Not to mention your species, your class, subclass, even going as far as your background, all things you could draw on.
Yeah, I think really for early backstory development for my character, it's definitely starting with the class, and the species as well plays a lot into it, because an elf background versus a dwarf background or a human background or a half orc, it's all vastly different. Every single one of those lives is a different life.
For sure, especially in more traditional high fantasy. If you're playing a setting in Eberron or Faerun or Greyhawk or one of those classic D&D ones, then that is even more true. Sphinx City, for example, it's not as true.
Yeah, no, it's
just
all
because
we're
Sphinx City
basically all
different, but
in a city. Yeah.
Yeah, so it just has that diversity. Maybe there is connections though. We've already established in this in Sphinx City the connection that the Fae has with this pseudo Italian culture. Yeah. So maybe there's something there. If you're playing a pixie, maybe you have a connection to the Fae, and it comes across as being Italian American. That's a fun way of playing that for Sphinx City.
Absolutely.
And maybe in this particular, I don't know if it'll be part of the established lore, but maybe if at your table you're playing Sphinx City, you're like, hey, half orcs are gonna have Oktoberfest and sausages and schnitzel and all this shit. It's like, that's actually hilarious. Let's do that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I personally am not going to include a ton of that into, because then it starts getting like, okay, goblins are Asian, this group is European, and it's like, then it starts to get a little tricky.
Yeah.
I only did the Feywild thing because in New York there's Little Italy, and I just changed it to Little Feywild, and I was like, that's kind of funny, and that's how that started.
And honestly, it's such a pillar of Sphinx City at this point. It's so hard to imagine it not being that.
Yeah, it's so fun combining those two cultures.
Right.
In like silly ways, especially because it applies to Fey, which is such a broad category. You know, like when I was creating this is like a deep cut. When I was creating this, I originally had the borough underneath Little Italy is called Chinatown in real life, right?
Right.
In Manhattan. And so I, you know, when I changed Little Feywild to Little Italy, or reverse, I was like, oh, maybe I'll make this like Goblinville instead of Chinatown. It'll be like Goblin Town or something like that, you know? I was just trying to do the same thing that I did with Little Italy. But then I realized that, like, you know, goblins have like their own sort of culture inside of D&D and like their own sort of stereotypes and different connotations, and I was like, ooh, this feels risky in a way that like could detract from the situation in a way that I don't want. So I was like, actually, that's not going to be the case. I'm just not going to do that. Like, just trying to be responsible in a weird way of like, maybe not actually. I mean, like the intention is good, but choice, the execution could fuck up, and so it was just like not worth it.
Right.
But so many fun ways. So when you're so that's as a player, you're going class and some of the species and some of that stuff with your backstory. Now as a DM, here's what I'm curious. As a DM, with NPCs, whether they are your villains or your shopkeeps or just random allies, whatever they may be, how deep? I know the answer is going to be it depends, but give us a little bit more. How do you come up with backstories for them? How in depth do you get? All of those kind of things. So not for PCs. PCs aren't even part of this. You're just doing NPCs.
Well, it depends. No, I'm kidding.
It absolutely does. I mean, that is the correct answer.
No. Yeah.
That's what we should get sponsored by, the Adult Diaper Company.
Yeah. So, stop. That was a slow burn.
That one flew over your head for a second, I could tell.
Yeah. Oh, man. So I generally get most in depth with my big bads. That's generally where I start, because a huge driving part of the big bad is like, why are they doing what they're doing? And backstory is the best way to get the why. You know, you've got the who, you've got the what, you've got all the other questions answered out, but you need like, why are they even doing this?
Yeah,
their
why are they
family has
why are you the way that you are?
Yeah. And, you know, it's because the king had his parents locked away in a prison and they died in there for some reason. And so now he has this blood vendetta against the king. Or, you know, he's actually gotten a little too close to the sun searching for power and is now at the, at the mercy of some dark devil or something along those lines. You know, and it kind of goes a little bit more like to that end with the big bads as far as figuring out the why. Now, NPCs are a little more flexible. I don't get too crazy on NPC backstories just because in my experience at my tables, players don't really give a shit. So I'm not going to spend a bunch of time getting into that, except for key NPCs.
For sure. Like
the king, the princess, the lord of the realm, or whatever. You know, those people do have
characters.
Right. But for like a shopkeep or something, I sometimes will use the whatever accent I come up with for them to come up with more of like a backstory.
Yeah.
Of stuff of like, oh, he sounds really silly, and you know, maybe he comes from like an entertainer background, or he's some like, it's a lot of shopkeeps have a lot of really funny stories, and it's like just usually silly little guys. I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
really, like I said, with NPCs, it's one of those things that kind of gets born in the moment as the players ask.
A little bit, yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's important too. Backstories do not end at any point. They're constantly being built.
Right.
And that's true for PCs
So,
and NPCs. Sometimes something happens and you're like, oh, fuck, that's a good reason that the villain would be doing this. Added. Mm-hmm. I've done that before where I've been like, the villain is this all-powerful, but what if he's related to one of the party members? Normally that's not the case, but that kind of fits here, actually. Holy shit.
It would work. Yeah. Yeah.
You say you don't know your father? Amazing. Perfect. You've never met him.
I do now.
Amazing. Yeah. Those are all good points. Because I feel similarly. I do the same thing. Like all of my recurring characters and like really important villains, they're all going to have some kind of soft backstory. And then sometimes I've gone more in depth and it has been helpful to give them personalities and think about how they would do things, you know?
Right.
Like give them motivations. Like coming up with a loose
Right,
backstory
yeah.
is helpful for having some motivations of like, what would this character do? Like, would this character throw down their arms and surrender, or would they fight to the death? And obviously, you can make those. Excuse me, you can make those decisions in the moment. Of course, use the context clues available to you. However, sometimes it could be easier when you're like, well, this guy is working for the bad guy because the bad guy promised an antidote for his dying wife. So, like, he is going to fight to the death because he believes that his loyalty will get his wife cured.
Right.
And then when you kill him, you'll find a letter on his body that's to his wife explaining, like, all this.
Oh, I love doing that. That's one of my favorite, like, post-murder little things to drop. It's like, you find, make the characters feel bad sometimes just for the sake of it. Because, like, you know, a lot of times there's just a bad dude. But I have had them come across a group of goblins. They just out of hand murdered like 20 goblins. And I had them find on one of the dudes like a message written in crayon, like "I love you, Daddy," and the E's backwards, and it's got like stick figures of like two little, like a big goblin and a little goblin holding hands. Yeah.
Yeah, when you're close with your players, you can fuck with them like that. I've done stuff like that too. Like I recently had one of our mutual friends, Nicole, cast friends on the guy who runs the museum in Sewer City because she thought he was withholding information. So she cast friends on him. The way that spell is written, they become hostile to you after the spell runs out. They do not like that spell being cast on them. But the way that manifested in this character, this NPC, was more so him being like, as soon as it wore off, he was like, yeah, I'd love to help. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, fuck you. Oh, that sucks. That sucks. You mind control me anytime you don't get what you want? That you're a piece of shit, actually. Do better. In the future, do better. And just walks away. And that was it. It wasn't violence. So we didn't get to combat. It was just him being right. Wow, what a dick move. And it was
That's a very good point
funny.
right there. Hostile does not necessarily mean violent.
Correct. Absolutely correct.
I think that's something that's like something that kind of goes back up into that but first thing of, you know, what's a common thing that happens is like hostility. Just because somebody's hostile to you does not necessarily mean that they're going to be violent for you. It just means they're not going to do things that you ask them. They're not going to want to give you information. They're not going to want to help you at all. They really just don't like you. It's like that, you know, that everybody's got that guy at work that he's just a dude who just doesn't have what they call the social skills and is just an asshole, and nobody wants to help that guy.
Yeah.
You know,
hostile.
Nobody, because he's just hostile, you know, maybe, and I don't know.
No, I think this
doesn't
is
mean
valid.
you're going out and getting into punching fights with this guy all the time. It just means no, you're not going to help him. He's not going to help you. You guys, he's just an asshole.
Sometimes people are just like that. But
yeah.
So we have already displayed that you can start with your backstory as a player when you're creating your character. It's happening during character creation, your backstory. It may work. It may look a little differently for every person. Sometimes you come up with this loose idea of a backstory before you even look at classes. Hey, I want to play.
Right.
I want to play somebody who's going through X, Y, and Z, or I want to play somebody who's never X, Y, and Z, like whatever it is, right? And then you look at the classes and you say which class fits this best and whatever. I want to play a library researcher who goes on adventures and okay, maybe I'll play a wizard, maybe I'll play a monk, maybe I'll play, So you could do it that way. You could pick your class first. You could pick your species first. You could come up with them all together. There's tons of ways to do it. I think the important thing is working with the rest of the table and the DM. I think is always a good point. The DM, I guarantee, would be more than happy to help flavor your ideas to fit the setting or work with you in ways to give you examples or possible ideas, like I'm always the type to like if a player's like, hey, I really want to play a thief, I'll be like, sick, here's 5 thieves guilds, or we can come up with our own, and that's fine too. Because I'm going to give them the specific stuff that's in my setting already that I've already come up with, that's an easier connection to make. But if for some reason we decide that these ones don't fit, then let's do another one.
Yeah.
Or
absolutely.
Change one to fit better or whatever, because playthrough to playthrough, you can change things also.
And and the same thing goes for like deities and other forms of that type of thing. Maybe there aren't great fits for that, but you can come up with a deity or a worship style that kind of fits better with the cleric or the paladin as far as their personal preference play wise.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the type of character that they would like to play.
Right.
Because that's the important part, is trying to figure out what type of D&D character they want to play. Or, TTRPG character, whatever. One of those important things that comes into backstory, I think, in a way that is pretty unique, is the background during character creation. And the only reason I put emphasis on background as opposed to class and everything else is just because this is what your character, most of the time, obviously this can change slightly table to table and character to character, but like most of the time, the background is like what your character was doing before they became an adventurer. It's literally part of their backstory.
Right. And so this is kind of why I start with class and species, because usually once I get to the point of, okay, I'm going to play this, poet samurai character, and then going into the next step of, okay, well, what kind of background would he have? Well, probably he'd be some kind of an entertainer of some sort.
Oof, I feel like a couple though.
You could do a couple,
sage, like learning about different things. You could do Outlander, or like something like being alone a ton of time,
right?
Like the haunted one.
There's a ton or something.
And
yeah,
they each flavor it totally differently, because the entertainer poet samurai feels quite different from like,
true.
You know what I mean? The soldier,
the wandering
poet samurai
sword. Yeah.
That's cool though.
But yeah, so like that kind of thing. That's where, so like I'll get the loose framework of my backstory, and then I'll pick the background, and the background will further inform my decisions for the rest of the backstory.
Yeah, for sure. And just like everything else, you can then flavor that background to fit this setting, to fit your character.
Right.
That way, in theory, you should be able to have everyone pick the same background at the table and it look a little different for everybody. In theory. Not necessarily suggesting that, although that is a really interesting and fun idea. But
yeah.
Like how one person interprets their character having the folk hero background could look totally different from other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like maybe one of the folk heroes is truly like an adventurer. They saved the town from like a dragon. And maybe somebody else's folk hero is like, you invented indoor plumbing. And they're like, we fucking love this guy.
Yeah.
He's amazing. Mr. Toilet, he calls himself. He calls his invention
Toilet.
after himself. Yeah, no, there's so many interesting ways to just continually flavor things to fit.
Is John.
His name is Porta Potty. Also,
John Porta Potty. Running down the street.
If for some reason, because like with Sphinx City, it's one of those things where like as written, the backgrounds are hard to sometimes fit. You know, like soldier, folk hero, sage, outlander. Like some of them are a little like harder to make fit in the world of Sphinx City because it's modern, and obviously D&D as written is meant kind of more for the traditional medieval European high fantasy.
Right.
But it's not that hard to be like, cool, soldier background. Okay, you are a security officer. You were a prison officer. You were a police officer. You were a firefighter. There's like a million ways we can phrase this and figure this out or something like that. Maybe you served in like some kind of armed forces and you're retired from that. Or
I was going to say, like,
discharged,
like, you know, modern day has soldiers as well.
Yeah,
like
sure.
we definitely still have soldiers around. It's not like it's one of those lost arts or whatever. There's still people out there that are soldiers.
No doubt. I'm just thinking of Sphinx City
I think
because
that
the implication with that is then that there needs to be entire militaries, which means that there's like countries warring with one another, which makes me think about Sphinx City in a way that I'm like, oh boy, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Which is why I lean
the
towards
geopolitical climate.
First. Yeah. Maybe you're a mall cop. That's the soldier you are. And that's fine. Easier. And that's fine for you. Maybe you're a bodyguard. That's also fine. So there's tons of different ways to go about things. Backgrounds are also one of the easiest things to homebrew. So if nothing is truly fitting your player's build, work with them. Depending on you're using 2014 or 2024, there's interchangeable some stuff. Obviously the origin feats are a little different. 2024 has the ability score increases tied to your background, but you can also just hand wave that the way that Tasha's did and be like, okay, it's a +2 to one stat and +1 to another. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Because that's how I felt with that. I felt like they just moved the goalposts in terms of putting it to the background, where now it's like, well, the min-maxers are going to feel like they have to pick certain backgrounds just to make their characters optimized, and I hate that. I get why the power players want to do that. I hate that it's an easy thing to hand wave, but
forcing. Yeah, I don't like forcing character choices onto people just because of stats.
Yeah, because it's like, well, this is the best way to make this. Like, I hate seeing TikToks or D&D YouTube videos where it's like, here are the best species if you want to play a barbarian. Like, immediately you've lost my interest.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care which species you think is the best to play the thing. You're talking strictly numbers, and that is uninteresting to me personally. There's a place for that. I dig it sometimes.
No, but as a min-maxer, I also don't like the limiting factor of using backgrounds and or a species as part of the ability score picking process.
Yeah.
I would much rather make my decisions as a character to be whatever I would like it to be. Like maybe I want to play a Loxodon, but I also want to play like a Loxodon rogue.
Yeah, and have a ton of
that
decks.
Shouldn't really,
That's a fun thing. That's so fun to be a sneaky elephant.
Yeah.
Man. That's such a fun idea though. Yeah, it's so stupid to be like, no, you can't do that actually, and be like, why not, man? Magic exists. Like, they're fucking elephant people. Who gives a shit? Let's just have fun. You know? I agree. I totally agree with that. So, backgrounds are a good starting place with the character creation, as well as all of the aspects, all of the little Lego pieces to build your character up. Mm-hmm. But then we get into like less of the insular, you're just looking at yourself form of character creation, where you're like, I want to play a wizard, and I want to play a Loxodon, and I want to play this. And now we start to connect that to everything, whether that is places, people, patrons, the world. We're building that connection so that your character isn't like Roller Coaster Tycoon, where you can just pick up a character and put them anywhere on the map.
Right.
It's like
right. Yeah.
It feels lived in. You are part of this world.
You've lived here your entire life.
Yes.
Type of situation like that. And, just going through life, you are going to make connections with people, places, and things.
Yeah, absolutely. And conversely, that also people, places, and things are going to make connections with you.
Right.
Just like you will be affected by the things around you, it is possible that the things around you will be affected by you. And so it's a beautiful partnership. And this is where the DM comes into play, I think, big time, because ideally they know a ton about the setting and the world and stuff like that. And also, this is where you're already starting the collaborative storytelling,
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah. This is where the story begins. Before even rolling one single die. Well, you'd probably be rolling a few for like ability scores and stuff,
all that kind of shit. But I get what you're saying.
But before
you're not
we're
rolling
actually,
a ton
like,
of
sitting
D20s.
down and talk. Yeah, exactly.
There
we go. It's all D6s. Yeah, you haven't busted out the 20 yet. We're still in the process. But yeah, I mean, it is really important. And it also, as a DM, when players give you stuff like that, it also helps in the storytelling process on your end too. Maybe, they're going to, when they go to this town, they've already got a connection with somebody who can tell them what's going on, rather than them having to go meet some new freaking king or whatever. Maybe their homeboy from back in the day is like, yo, this dragon has been fucking our shit up. You got to come get him, bro.
Listen, Trander, I can't help you right now, bro. Trander, I can't help you.
Trander, what a name.
Dude, no, it's so true though. Having NPCs already aligned up, that's so much fun. It gives players a sense of ownership over these fake towns and stuff. Just this idea of like, hey gang, we can go meet my friend. Like I know the shopkeep in this town, or I know the leader of this town, or the soldiers guild or whatever, like so much fun to give them a little bit of ownership, like their character is really getting to introduce the town to the other characters as opposed to the DM doing all of it. That's so fun to be able to introduce a town to the group through a player as opposed to through yourself and you doing dialogue that is like exposition.
Yeah.
So fun.
It also helps give out motivations for stuff other than, they just went to a job board. It's no, your high school sweetheart has been, kidnapped by the dark priest or whatever. And now you've got to go stop him. These dang priests, always dark. They're always dark.
Man, no, I totally agree.
Yeah,
because it makes you have more skin in the game,
right?
Because you're connected to things, you're connected to people and places and things. So you have more skin in the game. You just have more connections. So like, imagine how different it is to be like, hey, that town over there that you guys visited and didn't really make any close relationships, they're being attacked, and it's like, oh man,
who cares?
How much do they want us to save the town?
Right.
Versus like, hey, your hometown is being ravaged right now by evil sorcerers. You gotta get in there. And then it's immediately Mama? Papa? Oh no.
Oh no.
They are going to burn spell slots to teleport there, to cast sending. They're going to figure things out. It just makes everything way more. It ramps everything up. It allows for plot hooks to be easier.
Absolutely.
You can lay a tiny little clue and they'll pick up on it more easily because they're like, did you say my hometown? Is that the name of my brother? Like, you know what I mean? Like little tiny when you tie things in and they're like, that's my family name on that inscription. Like, what the fuck? And now they're taking notice. Now they're invested.
Right.
And this can also be true for gods and patrons and organizations and stuff like that. Like having there be, when they're like a member of the Thieves Guild, that's a lot of possible opportunities in every town. Maybe this Thieves Guild operates and gives them side jobs if that's something that your campaign allows for, or like just information, another place to get resources.
Man, we found this. We got noticed that there's some really super secret treasure in that hill over there. You should go check it out.
Yeah. And because I'm a part of this thieves guild, I trust you and I will do this. I know that it's not just like a wild goose chase.
Right.
And then like with the deities and patrons and stuff like that, it's really fun just to establish the relationship that the god or goddess has with this person, this PC, how their worship looks, how that can maybe flavor how the temple would look. Maybe it gives you fun opportunities to introduce other followers of that same faith, and maybe they maybe they worship the same way, maybe they worship a different way. So many possibilities. Not to mention,
absolutely,
I've mentioned this in the past, but having deities and like warlock patrons and stuff is really nice because it gives you like free allowance to do visions and plot hooks in that way. That's really easy,
right?
Depending on how pious the character is, I guess. But there's nothing like having a god talk to you in your dreams and be like, you need to go to the mountain, actually. Stop fucking around in the town. Downtime's over.
Stop stealing everything.
Don't make me come down there. Don't make me come down there. If I have to come down there, it's not going to be good. Stay where I can see you. Amazing. And then from the character creation standpoint, and this all has to do with like the connections and all that stuff, but it just from a DM's benefit, all of the world building that creates.
Yeah.
Most of it, this has already been mentioned, but the idea of intertwining parts of the plot with the backstory. Somebody comes up with a backstory thing. You're like, oh, the Kaladin's a perfect example. Oh, my brother died on the battlefield. I couldn't save him. It haunts me forever.
Yeah.
Gold. I'll take that. Yes, he did die, but not in the way you think. And also, it means something because something to do with your destiny and the Raven Queen, and that will set up for things that happen months later.
Yeah. Years even.
Yeah. Or just having like knowing pretty early on that Felis's mom was going to be an important figure, a really powerful NPC that you guys would eventually link up with.
Right.
And building out to that. And now that Felis and her mom are back together, man, the drama continues.
Oh my goodness. The Felis Mox drama in our game is
palpable.
So good.
It is intense.
It's so good.
I keep trying to humanize this mom, and I'm trying so hard to make her nice and like reasonable. And as I'm talking to Felis, I can see the Discord just blowing up, being like, "This bitch." She's really gonna sit
and that's
there
what
and
we
say
have.
that, and I'm like, damn.
It's both Discord channels. It's that one, and then also our Celestial Arcanum
one, yeah.
the hiding one where we don't tell you stuff.
I believe it because
it's great.
I'm sitting here, I'm trying to make her into a reasonable person, but it is hard because I mean, like, it's one of those things where, I mean, I guess in a fantasy world it would be more relatable. This idea of being like, well, I'm an elf who lives 1,000 years. I had a daughter. I'm in the prime of, I'm still young as hell technically.
Right.
I'm still adventuring. Like, the world still needs saving. Shirley can't bring a small girl with me, so I don't know what else to do. So she has an incredible dad. I feel safe leaving. You know what I mean? Like, it is a very difficult thing to do. But also it does bring about tons of feelings of abandonment and isolation and all of these things. So rightfully so, it's a rough situation. But like, all of that amazing juicy stuff was born out of the very simple idea of, what if I make this NPC her mom?
Right.
Like, the NPC always exists, but what if she's her mom? Right.
And it gives the NPC more gravitas as well.
Yeah.
Of this NPC was always going to be important. Now they're even more so.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so true. So much fun. And then, like, you can also use backstory to help you flavor some villain plans and ideas and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there have been several examples in our actual plays. One of them was you played in Mythos University Season 1, you played a character called Icarus.
Yeah. And
He's got a dad.
Daedalus. Yeah.
Daedalus, yep. And,
He's,
what if he was a backstabbing fucking cheat, liar, bad guy, villain?
Yeah. What if he was bad?
What if he was bad and also evil? And so that became a thing. Not to mention another characters. I won't spoil it. Watch the season. But
yeah.
Or tying a villain into a PC's backstory. As opposed to, I didn't necessarily with Icarus. It was one of those things where I knew you were playing Icarus. I looked up Icarus and Daedalus, just like straight up Wikipedia stuff, but like just basic information. Daedalus is immortal. He's been forced to serve and do all these creations, and he invented the labyrinth and right? And so I already had like a loose idea of my plot for the villains, and so Daedalus just naturally made sense. And I was thinking from a mechanical standpoint, I was like, woof, having an evil artificer, that's fucking scary. So let's do that. And so it kind of just came naturally. But you could also, sometimes you already have a villain. The character already has their backstory. And then you're kind of like, whoa, here's this beautiful little, like almost a blank in their backstory. It just says their house burned down and some of their family members were killed. But it doesn't say who started the fire. Doesn't say how the fire started or whatever, right? That's where you can take that creative license and fill it in a little bit.
This is the
and be
bad guy did this.
What if it was the Mad Hatter?
One of the big bads and one of the boss monsters in this campaign. What if it was them?
What if it was?
That's really gonna piss off the player.
Yep, and it sets up for all different kinds of things because I can have like foreshadowing. Like when you set up some of these things in advance like that, it gives you the opportunity to foreshadow better. Yeah. Because you can be a little bit more vague about it, but things will become more clear as time goes along. Like, obviously if you're writing like a novel, or let's say you're writing like a children's book series that's going to be several books, it certainly helps to know where you're going to go so that you can leave clues along the way. Otherwise, you have to like go back and be like, "Fuck, okay, they saw the moon that day. All right, let's interpret it this way." And then you have to like, what's the phrase? Reverse engineer a ton of stuff. Whereas, so sometimes that's why I like having like all the villains kind of planned out beforehand, as that's like my writing style when it comes to being a DM. But man, so many fun things to do.
It's a lot easier it's a lot easier to plan out all the bad guys when you're doing a short run live action too versus a long run campaign. If you're doing a long run campaign, obviously all of this stuff will come into effect, but also not every single monster, NPC, bad guy has to have this huge fleshed out story, whatever. Sometimes it is just what it is. It is just an adventure. You guys are a group of adventurers that are trying to right the wrongs in the world. Not every single thing needs to have this crazy, extensive tie back to your players.
For sure.
Just because, if you're doing a long run campaign, we've been going for 4 years now. Like, not every bad guy's been super extremely tied. There have been definitely very impactful, meaningful bad guys, but also sometimes a purple worm's just a purple worm.
That's true. The purple worm was just a purple worm. Even though the purple worm had a little bit of a backstory, just because I was including all these gnolls who summoned it and were worshiping it. An idea I took from NADPOD. But
those
a good example. He's not like connected to
specifically
the main
malevolent towards the party. It's just they were evil gnolls doing evil gnoll things.
Exactly. Yeah. They're not like Knights of Cancer for people who are familiar with the home game. You can check out all of our Sword Coast Coup recap episodes over on the Patreon. It's one of our bonus action episodes. Go check that out. Link in the description. Now, with this backstory stuff, we get these characters kind of fleshed out a little bit. I think it's important to reiterate, because I think we already said this. Number one, you don't have to have the entire backstory figured out. In fact, you shouldn't, I would argue. I think it's very important to leave some blanks, because some things you're going to feel, things are going to come up and this is all dungeon masters already know this, so players strap in because will also happen to you. Something will happen and you go, fuck, that's a better idea than I had.
Yeah.
And you want the freedom to be able to switch things up. And so if you've already been playing for 6 months in your home game and you're like, man, remember how I've been establishing so hard that my character doesn't have any siblings? I actually really think that it would be better if they had a sibling. It's like, not that that's the end of the world. You could do that.
Right.
It's not a big deal to retcon that. But like sometimes it is nice just to leave that thing blank until you really know. You find your character as you play the game. You develop them as you're RPing and fighting as them. And I also think it's a huge benefit to the DM, who can then better help you connect to the world. It's a lot easier to be like, my character comes from a small farming town. Then my character comes from Indianapolis City, in this town, in this area, population of 400. We're known for rhubarb and da-da-da, and you're coming up with all of these little tiny details. And now the DM has to be like, okay, where does Indianapolis City fit in my fantasy world? And it's like, that's where the collaboration should happen, is you're working together. The DM needs to give and take a little bit, and so does the player. I think that's really important.
Absolutely.
I know there was one time, and it's such a shame that this didn't work out, but it has to do with that person specifically. But there was a time where I played a PC named Lilith, small elf girl, grave domain cleric to the Raven Queen. But my character had woken up with 0 memories. Didn't know what her name was, didn't know who she was, where her parents were, where she's from, how she got these powers, nothing.
Right.
And I had talked to the DM beforehand and asked if this was okay. I said, hey, I have a crazy idea. What if my character doesn't know any of their backstory, and therefore I, Justin, don't know any of their backstory? You know the backstory, though.
Right.
And thus gave me like dreams and visions where like I would have a memory with a man and we're having breakfast and it's like, that could be my dad, but I really don't even know. All this little stuff. And I thought it was really fun and interesting. It puts a lot of extra work on the DM, of course, because now they have to come up with a backstory for a PC. But if the DM's down for it, pretty cool.
Yeah, I did a whole campaign like that. What Lies in the Darkness. I one shot, 2 shot of all of the PCs had no idea what their backstories were, and it's really fun to give. And this is like definitely some not recommended for the very brand new fresh DMs, but it's really fun to tell a backstory that doesn't quite mean what the players think it does as the story progresses. Because you can do a lot of red herrings, you can do a lot of stuff where it makes things seem one way, and then you can find out later that actually it's not like that at all.
It was
actually
really
you guys
fun,
are best friends.
Yeah, it was really fun because it changed how we roleplay those characters.
Right. Because
it goes back to this idea of like, what makes a person who they are? Is it truly the experiences and memories that they have? Mm-hmm. Like how much of it is nurture versus nature and that kind of idea, So it was really fun role playing those characters because after each like vision or memory blast, it was like, oh, I might be an asshole. Oh, wait, no, I am an asshole. Perfect.
Great.
Or,
awesome.
Whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a ton of fun. Now, we know so much character development for players happens during the game. We often find our characters along the way. But during the game, there's a ton of things that DMs can do with these character backstories. Everything from, just to list them quickly, planning encounters, side quests, making the world feel immersive, flavor just in general. But let's go over them a little bit. So, now we mentioned that the DM, you are under no obligation to put in thousands of hours of work to make every single little tiny combat be like this super meaningful, impactful thing. Sometimes
Absolutely
wolves
not.
attack in the forest, and that's okay.
Yeah, right.
But the backstories can give you a way to make those combats more intense.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, when it comes to those kind of encounters, I mean, like I said earlier, sometimes a purple worm is just a purple worm. But there is a certain gravitas that you can add and should add to some of your bigger fights, some of your more important fights. If you guys are going up against the BBEG, there should almost always be some kind of a deep connection between the party and the big bad. And it's something that can be cultivated over the course of several encounters. As far as finding notes where, this person has kidnapped one of the players' families, or, their hometown has been getting terrorized by this person for whatever reason. It doesn't always have to be important, but it definitely should sometimes be important. Like if you don't engage your players' backstories like that, it's going to be really hard to keep them engaged and keep them from murder hoboing the whole countryside, which is something that happens a lot in some campaigns where, we've done the D&D horror stories of, oh no, my players are going around and killing everything. And a lot of times when I read those stories of, oh, they're just not doing what I want them to, I always come back to, well, it feels like you're not engaging the players on the level that they want to be engaged on.
Yeah.
Of backstory reasons, like backstory stuff. Sometimes you do have a table full of murder hobos and there's nothing you can do about it. But I feel like a lot of those kind of things, and like I was saying up at the top of, going around and stealing everything, if there's no consequences for them stealing stuff, or they have no moral reason not to do it, they're going to do it.
Yeah, definitely. It comes back. Yeah, you have to start asking yourself, like, why? Why are they murder hobos? Why are they stealing everything?
Right.
Why aren't they going on the adventures that I've laid before them? And sometimes you can just ask them, hey, why didn't you guys pick up that job?
Right.
What was the reason? Like, what could I have done differently? Like, just ask for feedback sometimes. And also, and then players, the advice is tell your, DMs how they're doing sometimes. I think that's important. Because you're always going to get the, hey, did everybody have a good time? Everybody like this session? And you just get a bunch of like, yeah, it was great.
Yeah,
had a good time.
It's great.
And you're like, okay, fantastic. Sounds like I need no changes.
But perfect, no notes, got it. But definitely using the player's backstory, it's going to give them that extra skin in the game for encounters, especially, like I said, especially important encounters. There's so many good character development things that can happen in combat that are not strictly I run up and slash the guy with my sword.
Yeah.
You killed my father. I'm coming after your ass. Like, that's a whole thing. Like,
yeah, big time. That was like the tiniest of, it's not really a spoiler. I won't go into too much detail, but there was a line that a villain said to a character named John Smith. There was a line that a villain said to that character. And I think you and the rest of the table were like, oh, you fucked up. And I interjected. I was like, just so everyone knows, Justin knows that what that person just said crossed the line. Mentioned his family. She's dead. Yeah. I know this.
Yeah.
Like,
you done goofed, bud.
But I did it because I knew the character's backstory. I knew how important this would be. I knew that it would elicit a certain response. So it was funny. So
right.
Let's go for it.
Yeah. For sure. Like, that is really, like I said, just give them some skin in the game. And honestly, it will solve a lot of your murder hobo-y problems.
Yeah, for sure.
In my opinion.
It's just, there's something about connecting your characters to the world that is so important, making them feel like they're a part of it, and that they have their own agency as players to shape that world and like make their mark on it. And there's like, we throw around the word immersion a lot. Like, oh, you want your world to feel immersive, and you want your game to feel immersive. And that just, obviously that means just like, you feel like you're in it. It's like when you're watching a movie and you feel like you're truly part of it and you're just sucked in. And at the end of the day, D&D is a fun tool for that, but it's not like tabletop role-playing games as an entire medium, not just D&D, but any tabletop role-playing game, there's an aspect of it that's just not immersive. You're not playing a video game. You're not seeing visuals most of the time unless you're doing all the minis and maps and stuff. But like at the end of the day, it's all up in your imagination. So often you guys aren't necessarily seeing the same visual aid. And so you're never going to reach perfect immersion, but there's something to be said about making your characters feel like their characters are part of the world.
Right.
And they feel bad when bad things happen or feel good when they do good things. Like that's what we're going for.
Yeah. And and that can take a form of a lot of things, but the world should change as your players move through it, I think is a huge part of immersion. And it's kind of getting away from the backstory side of things of, if they go through a town and they do bad things, well, maybe the next time they come back, there's wanted posters or something along those lines. Like there are bounty hunters after them. Send bounty hunters after them. And that also could be a fun backstory thing of, maybe one of your characters is playing kind of a more violent, aggressive kind of history where they've just been in the fighting pits and have been just like this gladiator of some sorts. Well, maybe there's some kind of a bounty hunter. Maybe they got out and now they have people coming after them, Yeah,
there's so much you can do. It really depends on how much information your players give you.
Right.
Because it's all ammo.
Yeah.
It's all ammo that you can use right against them. So easy. Like they're just offering, it's like a small rabbit, just like putting a carrot in its mouth, sitting on a dinner plate. Thank you. Thank you, Wascoolie Wabbit. Perfect. So many interesting ideas
and having
coming to mind.
Yeah. But having a lot of NPCs tied into your players, having places tied to your players that can get you out of the monologuing exposition mode. Of something that happens or it happened a few times. We're all pretty familiar with these places now because we've been there a couple of times. But like when we went to Tribor and had Sunny's family or Sunny show us around the town because she's lived there her whole life, rather than having to get some NPC tour guide or somebody to explain where everything is. You have a player that has an intimate knowledge of the city, and you guys can kind of visit the town with them.
Yeah.
That type of thing.
100%.
It is very helpful. Like, because that is one of those things that also loses you player engagement is if you're sitting there in that monologuing of, okay, here's a new thing. I'm going to sit here for 20 minutes and tell you about it.
Yeah, where it's all like above board as opposed to the player being able to do it in character is really, really fun. A practical tip for that I recommend is sometimes I've done this in the past where I'll hand out a map of the town that they're visiting or whatever it is, and the map will have numbers on it, like landmarks or like important shops or whatever, and I'll only send the key that actually has what those locations are, like corresponding to the numbers, like number 1 is the shield tower or whatever. I'll only send that to the player who's lived there.
Right.
That way they have it. So they can be like, oh, we're passing by this thing. And that's fun. And then I can expand on it as I see fit. You know what I mean? But
yeah,
that's always been really, really fun in terms of, just sharing your world with your players.
Right.
Letting them also take ownership over these places because their characters have this intimate knowledge of it and connection to and all this stuff. And then sometimes they come up with ideas that you didn't think of. Hey, can we have a festival? Yes, we can. Let's do it.
For sure.
What do you think it would look like? Because that's another important thing of Backstories is this idea of, I mentioned before with using Taylor's Icarus character and the dad, or using also, I'm going to pivot slightly, using Kaladin. So Taylor comes to me and says, Kaladin's brother passed away in the war. I couldn't save him. It's a big part. Now, Number one, I think it's important to honor what the player has said. Your brother died in the war. Yes, he did. I'm not going to, unless I tell you about it. Like, if you and I still in the character creation phase was I don't know why that obviously wouldn't come up, but like me being like, actually, what if he didn't die? What if he actually just ran away and he was considered a deserter? You know what I mean? But that would be a back and forth at the end of the day. Right. Would not just be my decision, because I think that is where DMs using backstory can lead into taking player agency on like the worst side of the spectrum is what I'm saying. Right. Where you can start to be like, okay, actually he didn't die and this happened instead and and all these other, you're starting to get mastermindy and like planning all these extra things, and then the player's like, this is not how I thought this was going to go, and it changes how I feel about my character, and then they're not having fun. Which is why, like, sometimes I feel very strongly about reaching out to players when things about their backstory come up to get their take on it. Now, I might use their take, I might use their opinion to flavor my own, or we'll collaborate or something, but I'm always going to ask, like, hey, how do you think your mom is as a NPC? Like, how should I roleplay them? You know? Mm-hmm. Or like, just all kinds of stuff like that. I think is really, really important. Just making sure that your players feel like they came up with their backstory. They should, continue to have some control over that.
Absolutely.
And have their words be respected and honored in the way of you not just completely being like, actually, that didn't happen. This happened because I think it's cooler. Is like, what? That's crazy. So just as a heads up, most of our viewers, listeners, I don't think we'll do that, but I felt like it was important to say, because that unfortunately will happen time to time when you have a power hungry DM control freak who should be writing novels and not playing collaborative storytelling games. But
right,
what are you gonna do?
Right. Yeah. So
ton of things. I mean, we've gone over planning encounters and how you can use backstory to flavor all of those things. Not that every single encounter needs to be super connected, but it can make things more interesting and more fun. There's side quests. That's a really easy one, because that obviously has to do with, most of the time, backstory stuff. At least in my head. I mean, obviously you could do side quests that aren't backstory related, but to me it feels like, why wouldn't you? It feels like you missed opportunity to not delve deeper into one of the PC's backstories. But that's
I wholeheartedly agree that there is the place for a side quest to be backstory related, but also sometimes a purple worm's just a purple worm.
Sometimes it is, and sometimes you just need to get that purple worm.
So by all means, yeah. Don't feel like everything you do in the story has to be related to the PCs also. Is the other side of the spectrum, I guess, of like the opposite of what we're talking about right now, of making everybody feel connected. There is a time and a place where, it doesn't always have to be. It doesn't always have to be. And a lot of that, sometimes don't burn yourself out as a DM, because I've done that 100% of trying to write everything is got this weird, dark, deep connection to everything in the plot. And one of those things that kind of helped me avoid the burnout of storytelling was, sometimes it is what it is.
Sometimes it's just worm is just
wolves attacking the fort. Yeah. I've said that like 9 times this episode, but it is. But it is. So sometimes it is just, like you said, wolves attacking the forest. Sometimes that just happens.
Yeah, it's so true. A tip that I will give, this is kind of specific about side quests and stuff like that, is sometimes, especially if you're doing milestone leveling, leave yourself room for side quests.
Yeah.
So like when I wrote Sword Coast Coup, I planned it in such a way, knowing that there were entire levels, like when, all of the party are level 9, where that entire level is dedicated to a side quest. Because I was doing milestone leveling, and so I didn't want it to be like, well, during level 9, you have to take out this evil pirate captain, but also we're going to do a side quest in the Feywild, and so now it's just because it's milestone, it's like, well, you're doing, I don't know, or at least that was at the time, that was my understanding of milestone, was very rigid. Now, of course, milestone is less rigid. You can just as easily move things up. And if I was more comfortable as being a DM, I would have leveled you guys up sooner, probably.
Right.
As certain adventures took longer than others. But having an entire moment of the campaign planned and left open for side quests has proven incredible. Some characters are so connected to the plot that their quote-unquote side quest is part of the plot. For example, Fellis and her mom.
Right.
This is kind of Fellis's moment. But for Kaladin, for Sunny, you guys got to travel to alternate planes.
Yeah.
One the Shadowfell, one the Feywild, respectively. And that was because I had that time set apart. I knew that was going to be where we spend most of that chapter of the story.
Right.
And then, last but not least, just go over flavor in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Your character's backstory can influence a ton of flavor for different things. Because they're going to bring up a ton of flavor in just like how they describe their spells, what their character's wearing, what their instrument looks like, their weapons, as they're coming up with these different things to explain all of the answers to the questions that Taylor brought up with character creation of like, why am I a fighter? How does my being a fighter look different from other fighters? Why was I a fighter who trained at a monastery? Why am I not a monk? Like maybe there's reasons for that, and that could be really interesting to discover. And then taking all of the answers to those questions, the backstory, the learning your character as you've been playing along. Boom, you hit that milestone. You're now level 10. What does leveling up look like to you? How does your character go to sleep level 9, wake up level 10, and have new abilities? What does that look like? Or like, how does your connection to your deity or patron look unique? And these are all things.
How does it deepen? How does it increase in potency? All of that stuff.
Exactly.
Do you sit there and you train every single day and now you finally figured out, oh man, I can do this new sweet move? Or, sitting there scribbling in a book and finally crack the code on better spells.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a million different ways you can go about it.
It's incredible. There really is so much to play with when you have characters who come up with fun backstories and stuff. Not to mention, I should have mentioned it at some point in this episode. I guess we'll just end on this. Also, those characters can connect their backstories together. Just as a heads up.
Yes, absolutely. I think we're getting ready to do our kids on jet skis thing. And
kids on bikes.
Kids on bikes. Yeah, it's kids on bikes on jet skis. No, but it's one of my, like, me and another player are, brothers. Step brothers, which is going to lead to a whole bunch of fun shenanigans. And, we've played at tables. You and I together have played at tables with, brothers or, sister
siblings or
pair,
something. Yeah.
Siblings or something along those lines. And it leads to a lot of fun role play.
Oh, it's so fun, dude.
I really enjoyed Burroughs End on Dimension 20 for that reason. I mean, the family dynamic. The family dynamic of that show is so good. It's just so good.
Family.
Yeah,
we simply must. Maybe I'll do an isekai one where it's a family or something, or a holiday special one. I don't know, but we definitely need to do that because there's too much good that can come from that. I once played. This is crazy. The former mother-in-law of a character. So like it was like my daughter used to be married to this man, but they got divorced. So I am no longer his mother-in-law. But for some reason he agreed to drop me off and pick me up from the airport to my daughter's new wedding. And that was the relationship, because it was like I always had planned on being an older person, like an elderly grandpa,
right? And
then this one player decides I'm gonna be like the divorced dad, and so it was like, okay, the obvious answer is for me to play their parent, but the funnier answer is for me to play their ex's parent.
Yes.
Because
that is definitely way funnier.
Of just the whole car ride of me being like, I don't know why you two didn't work out. Just constantly that kind of drama.
Yeah.
Oh, dude. It was so fun. It was such a great game. Maybe one of the greatest games of the year. And that would have been 2025. But in 1966, Fresca was born. Thank you to Fresca for sponsoring
All right,
this
now that's all we can get into this time. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram at So You Want to Be a DM, or you can ask us a question at soyouwannabeadm@gmail.com. If you like the episode, don't forget to give us 5 stars and a review wherever you found us. Check out the Patreon and our Twitch with the link in the description. There's also a merch link down there. You should definitely check out the merch side of stuff. Merch! And join us next time for more Dungeon Master tips and tricks.
Bye.
See you.
And now I have the honor of giving a shout out to the members of our Patreon gang. Nub Muffins, may Paylor's light shine upon you. And then there's Tappy, Elijah, and Molly. We appreciate each and every one of you. Tune in next time for more tips and tricks from So You Wanna Be a DM.